Have you ever found yourself staring at a finished piece of art and thinking, something's just not working here, but you can't quite put your finger on it? My fellow artist, it just might be a color problem. I used to feel the same way. I'd get caught up in the excitement of creating and just reach for whatever paint tube or marker caught my eye at that moment. But I'd end up with work that looked a little chaotic. Turns out there's a way to fix that. Using a color palette. Wait, you might say. Aren't color palettes a tool for designers or something? Nope, they're just as useful for artists like you and me. And they don't have to be restrictive or complicated. In fact, they can unlock a whole new level of creativity in your work. When you think of painting or drawing, you probably focus on technique, subject, or even style. But how much thought do you give to color? Believe it or not, color does a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to setting the mood and guiding how people experience your art. And if you're not careful, colors can start competing with each other, leaving your piece looking more like a jumbled mess than a cohesive whole. So what's the solution? A color palette. But it's not just about picking your favorite colors and running with them. It's about selecting a group of colors that work together. And here's where it gets good. There are free tools online like the website Adobe Color, where you can play with different color combinations or even explore by popular search words. You can even put in your own search term and see what color palettes come up. A site that I really like is called coolers.co. I'm not sponsored, I just think it's a really cool site. They have a color generator where you can press the spacebar on your computer to generate a random color palette. When you find colors you like, you can lock them and have it generate more colors until you have your perfect 5-color palette. If you don't want to go digital, you could buy this book, which I love, called the Pantone Book of Color Harmony. This book divides colors into moods, and each section is filled with color wheels divided into 3 colors. With this book, the idea is to pick one of the color wheels, and you see how each of them is divided. So in this one, half of it's pink, and then you have a lot of purple, and then just a little touch of that turquoise color. The idea is in your finished design, or in this case, your finished art piece, you would use mostly the pink, then less of the purple, and even less of that turquoisey green color. And you could also pick a 4th or a 5th color as an accent from any of the colors on these pages that coincide with the mood. It doesn't have to be perfect ratios, but it gives you an idea of how to make a pleasing finished piece. A well-chosen palette can transform how your artwork feels. I can hear you asking, isn't that limiting though? Don't I want the freedom to use whatever colors I want? Well, think of it like this. Imagine if you were cooking and threw in every spice in the cabinet. Would the dish taste better, or would it just be confusing? Same thing with your art. Working with a color palette doesn't limit you. It can really help you focus. It gives your piece structure and helps everything work together towards a common goal. Now you're thinking, what if I want my art to be really colorful? Won't a palette limit me? Well, let's look at Austrian artist Hundertwasser as an example. At first glance, his art looks like an explosion of color, vivid, eclectic, and almost without rules. But if you look closer, there's structure. Hundertwasser's art exemplifies the idea that a palette doesn't have to be restrictive or subtle. His palette wasn't about limiting the number of colors he used. It was about selecting and balancing relationships between colors to create a vibrant yet cohesive composition. For instance, his pieces often use analogous colors, colors that sit next to each other on the color wheel, to create a base of harmony, while then adding pops of contrasting, complementary colors to add excitement and draw the viewer's eye. Here's another trick for you that Hundertwasser also used. Consider using neutrals to balance your colors. He strategically used black or white to help the more vivid colors stand out. If your art feels busy, adding neutrals can create breathing room. Think of them as pauses between musical notes. They give your colors a chance to shine even brighter. Neutrals are often overlooked when artists think about color, but they are critical to balancing out bolder hues. Not just black and white. Think of earthy tones like beiges, light grays, or even pale, muted versions of other colors. These create natural resting points for the eye, so your viewer isn't overwhelmed by bold colors fighting for attention. Try experimenting with neutrals in your backgrounds or as negative space. This will make your focal point stand out even more. Plus, neutral tones can help guide your viewer's eye through the piece in a more controlled, intentional way. And did you know that colors don't just make your artwork look nice, they actually have the power to influence how people feel? That's right. Color psychology is a huge part of how we experience art. For instance, red is often associated with energy, passion, or even danger, while blues tend to evoke calmness and tranquility. Understanding the psychological effects of color can help you evoke the right emotions in your viewers. I'd remember on my daily drive to work, I would pass a daycare, and I could see the walls inside were all painted this bright, lime yellowish green. I always used to feel bad for the kids and the teachers that had to spend the whole day in that environment. I just did an online search and I understand now why it repelled me so much. The color lime green promotes a feeling of excitement, confidence, and high energy. Not exactly the mood that I would want to evoke for 8 hours in a building full of young children. So it makes sense that in art, when you combine these psychological principles with a well-planned color palette, you can intentionally guide the viewer's emotional experience. I know, that's all very interesting, but where do I start? Glad you asked. Here's what I've learned. Start with emotion. What feeling do you want to convey? Is it calm? Is it energetic? Dreamy? Serene? Once you've figured out the vibe, pick colors that reflect that feeling. Cool blues and soft greens are great for peace, while bold yellows and reds might scream out energy. If you're like me, you've probably got a favorite picture of a sunset or an art piece that you really love, something that just feels right. Why not use those colors? You can upload that image into an online tool like Adobe Color and pull a palette directly from it, or just swatch out some paint and see which color combinations feel natural to you. Trust me, less is more when it comes to color. Try working with just 3 to 5 colors. You can always adjust the shades and tones within that palette to add variety, but keeping the main colors consistent is key to maintaining harmony. Don't be afraid to play within your chosen color palette. You're not locked into anything. You can try mixing different shades or adding texture to add depth. The point is to let your palette be your guide, not a cage. Here's an exercise to really feel the power of using a limited color palette. Take one color palette and make 3 different pieces with it. You'll be amazed how much range you can achieve. Maybe in one piece, the orange dominates with the blue and yellow as accents. In the next, you can flip the balance, make the blue your focal point, and see how the mood of the piece changes. Each time you shift the focus to a different color, the mood of the piece will dramatically change, but the overall harmony of the piece will stay the same. This teaches you to think critically about color and push your creativity within a framework. When you're limited to just a few colors, you're forced to think more critically about how you use them, and that's where the magic happens. Once you get the hang of it, using a color palette becomes second nature. But here's the fun twist. When you're comfortable with the basics, you can start diving deeper into color theory. Warm versus cool tones, complementary colors, contrast. These can add layers to your work that make it even more dynamic, but that's a lesson for another day. In the end, creating great art isn't about following strict rules. It's about making thoughtful, intentional choices. One of the most powerful choices you can make is how to use color. A well-crafted color palette brings your vision to life and guides your viewer's experience in a way that feels cohesive and impactful. Trust me, once you start using color intentionally, you'll notice a huge difference in how your art communicates its message. It's all about making the colors work for you. Finally, don't forget to revisit your color palette as the piece evolves. Sometimes a color you thought would work feels off once you've started. Stay flexible and adjust. Your palette is a guide, not a rigid rule. Check out this next video where I show you the perfect method for organizing all your art papers. I'll see you in the next one. Happy creating!